Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the statewide webinar for rural communities in preparation for Census 2020. I see a lot of folks are joining on right now. Our numbers are climbing, which is always nice to see. My name is Alex Colweiss. I'm a facilitator with California State University, Sacramento, and we support the state census efforts through neutral facilitation services and webinar management for today's webinar. As we all get on to the webinar, get our audio set up on the attendee end, I'm going to walk through the agenda for today, give you a highlight for our speakers, and then give you a couple of notes about how to participate remotely. So today's agenda is up on this screen for those who can see. So we're looking at doing a welcome and introductions. We'll give a couple of opening remarks, talk about the objectives for today. Then we'll dive into two key presentations. We'll hear from the U.S. Census Bureau on how the Census Bureau is looking to address California's needs, particularly in rural communities, some of the issues that they know that rural communities are facing. We'll talk about what the state is doing, addressing 2020 challenges and opportunities. Then a key piece of what we're doing today, which we're excited you're joining us for, is a panel discussion on strategies for success, on how to overcome barriers to complete count, so we get a complete count for all communities in California, including our rural communities. That'll be a chance for participants to provide some comments and questions, and then we'll move right into an open discussion on outreach efforts and strategies to achieve a complete count. That's what we'll really want to hear from you in the chat boxes and the Q&A boxes about what you're working on, key questions, key resources that you might need, other barriers you're seeing, things like that. And then we'll talk about next steps, give some closing remarks, and we'll wrap up for today. So a couple things I just want to mention that we are really excited to have some great panelists today who are joining us. We have Connie Stewart from the California Center for Rural Policy, Julie Beardsley, who is with the Mendocino County Health and Human Services Agency, Sylvia Paz, who is with Alianza Coachella Valley, and we do have some folks from, additional folks from the U.S. Census Bureau who will be joining us on the panel as well. They'll have a chance to introduce themselves a little bit later on today. So for attendees, looks like we've got 73 people so far joined on. That's great. Just want to give you a quick overview of how to participate. So you probably already joined by following the link through your email, and then you hopefully dialed in by phone or joined your computer audio with the numbers below. It's great if you can enter your participant ID just to link the two, your login and your phone line. Just a quick note that for anyone who's dialing in by phone, you're in listen-only mode for now. So if you do want to participate by chat or submit a comment, you will need to log in to a computer, or you could use your smartphone. All attendees are going to be on mute for the duration of the whole webinar. Let me go to the next slide here. This is how you would join the audio conferencing. A little bit of info there, and then this is how we're really going to hear from you. So use the Q&A or the chat function to ask a question or share a comment anytime during the webinar. We'll keep a queue of comments and questions and then share them out loud as we go through the different portions of the agenda. As you know, if we were in the room together, you'd have an opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe share your organization or affiliation. If you'd like to be introduced with your comment or question, just let us know when you submit it. You can share your affiliation if you want that included. We can only see your login name when you submit your question. So do let us know if you'd like to be introduced. If you need tech support, you can send a chat message to Q&A support, or you can email Micaiah Palmer at csus.edu. It's MICAIAH PALMER at csus.edu. Just a quick note that we are recording this webinar for future folks to enjoy it and learn from it and learn from the comments and questions that you all share. All right, that's all I've got for now. I would love to turn it over to our amazing California Complete Count Director to briefly welcome you and talk a little bit about today's objectives. Edith?
Good morning, it's Edith Skatagi, and I am the Director of the California Complete Count Census 2020 efforts. Thank you for joining us to discuss what I think is one of the most important civic engagement efforts and will have a huge impact on all Californians. This will be my third decennial census, but it will be what I think will be the most challenging. And rural communities have, as you can imagine, unique challenges to a complete count. So I look forward to engaging today in this webinar to learn more and share. So the webinar objectives today are to communicate the importance and benefits of course, engaging in this annual census. We want to provide information on the federal and state census outreach strategies and timelines. This is a federal operation, and Jessica will go through some of their key timelines. And we want to be able to identify opportunities to partner with the state to achieve a complete count of all of California's communities during Census 2020.
Great. So that's what we're here to do today. Again, also hear from you, get some feedback, and really discuss some questions. I'd love to kick us off on our first presentation. We're going to go over to Jessica Imatoshi, who's a partnership coordinator with the U.S. Census Bureau. Jessica, go for it. And if you want to introduce other members of your team as needed, take it away.
Great, thank you, Alex. Good morning. My name is Jessica Imatoshi, and I'm a partnership coordinator here at the Los Angeles Regional Census Center. And also in the room with me, I have the real brains of what we're going to talk about today. And that's Kim McGonigal. Did I say your name correctly? My name is always difficult to say, and then I end up butchering everybody else's last names. But Kim is our lead geographer, and so he's going to address a lot of the geography aspects of what we're going to talk about. And then Rafe, and then say your last name. Fakori. He is one of our area managers, and so he's going to discuss a lot of the operational side of things. So thank you again for having us. We'll go ahead and get started. And we're going to essentially start with our residency rules, because that's going to kind of lay the groundwork for, how we're going to discuss some of these operations. So the concept of usual residence is the guiding principle in determining how we conduct a count. And usual residence has typically been defined as the place where a person lives and sleeps most of the time. We do know that there's a wide diversity around that and various types of living arrangements. And so the concept of usual residence has a variety of applications. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is how that affects changes in enumeration for natural disasters. And there are a couple of factors to consider when deciding whether to change an affected area's enumeration, whether it goes from self-response to what we call update leave. Some of the factors that affect that deal with the number of housing units impacted, the compactness of the affected area, when the disaster occurred, the post office delivery sequence file, and whether those identify those addresses and whether those no longer exist in the mail delivery system. And then addresses in the affected areas will also have an opportunity to be visited during what we call NARFU, or non-response follow-up. So, ultimately, if, all the different ways that we try and enumerate, the last opportunity still exists through non-response follow-up. We have a couple of examples of some recent natural disasters, and those are related to the Redding and Paradise areas, or what were called the car and campfires. And so in those instances, we looked at whether to move the burn areas from self-response enumeration to update leave enumeration. In both of those fires, there were more than 1,000 housing units destroyed, and they were in very compact areas. So, and then they also had update leave enumeration close by. So, that kind of helped determine, to move it to an update leave enumeration. However, on the next slide, you will see some examples of the Wolseley and Hill fires in the Los Angeles and Ventura counties. And in that instance, we left enumeration in the self-response category because there were less than 1,000 housing units destroyed. There was not a nearby update leave enumeration area. The areas are eligible for new construction and could be part of our new construction program. And there was extensive outreach to some of the local governments in thinking about that. One of the other things that we were asked to talk about is about the digital divide and about broadband. And so you'll see that an infographic on the next slide that covers a wide view of how we have been able to capture the percentage of households with broadband across the United States. And in our region, you know, we have a very large region, and you know, there's great differences between Hawaii and going all the way up into the most rural and remote villages of Alaska. For the most part, we do have really good broadband in our area, but of course, as we know, especially even here in California, there are these pockets of areas that do not have broadband. And so on the next slide, you'll see, you know, what we call the digital divide. And it shows the percentage of households by broadband internet subscription. And it's divided by computer type, race, and Hispanic origin. And so, you know, this definitely affects some population groups more than others. I typically work with the tribal reservation areas. And so, you know, for example, I know I've been on some of the tribal reservations in Northern California, and there is absolutely no broadband in home. I mean, there's very limited cell signal. And so we do know that these challenges are going to exist. And you know, we are working diligently on thinking about how to address that. And then we are also making sure that we have these communications with our partners on how they feel that we should best partner with them to kind of fill this gap where the digital divide lies. So on the next slide, it talks about partnerships in areas with limited in-home broadband access. We're actively partnering with public libraries and public schools, as well as colleges and universities. And you know, this is one of the things that we always raise and discuss with our local government partners, especially those located in rural areas, to see whether the city or county has community centers or government offices that do have access to broadband that would be willing to, you know, make that available to residents to complete census forms, even within the government office system itself. So whether that is setting up a kiosk system, you know, or just having some kind of designated laptop or iPad there. And, you know, several have been open to that concept. We are also partnering with CBOs who serve rural communities and getting some feedback around how best to do that. And of course, you know, we have other options to respond separate than online. We still have a phone option to respond to the questionnaire, as well as the traditional paper form. And again, at the end of the day, there's always an opportunity to be counted as part of NARFU, our non-response follow-up operation. The next slide, we talk a little bit about group quarters. And group quarters are a place where people live or stay in a group living arrangement. And this can include things such as correctional facilities, nursing homes, dormitories at colleges and universities, or such things as workers group living quarters, for example, migratory farm worker camps. And so, you know, we have a separate operation for that. And on the next slide, we talk a little bit about service-based enumeration, and that has to do with emergency and transitional shelters, soup kitchens, mobile food vans, and targeted non-shelter outdoor locations. So we divide our group quarters operation into 3 categories, which fall under service-based enumeration. That essentially includes emergency and transitional shelters, then the soup kitchens, and then what we call the TENSL, or the targeted non-shelter outdoor locations. On the next slide, we talk about how group quarters are enumerated, and the data is collected in 2 phases of operation. The first step is to contact each group quarters and schedule a time to be visited. And the second step is to actually do the enumeration. And we enumerate service-based providers over a short 3-day period, which occurs very close to Census Day, which, as most of you know, official Census Day is April the 1st of 2020. So on the next slide, we talk about group quarters advanced contact and, you know, the preparation stage. Group quarters advanced contact occurs between February the 3rd of 2020, and March the 6th of 2020. The advanced contact that's done in a couple of different ways. It's initially done in our field offices, what we call our area census offices. It's done over the phone. We conduct a phone interview. We establish a point of contact. We determine if there is a population at that group quarters on census day. And we collect expected, what they estimate the population to be on census day. And then we schedule an appointment for the actual enumeration. As part of that, we make sure that we document any legal issues or language issues, as well as any logistical concerns. The next slide talks about enumeration methods. And so, we do have different methods to enumerate the facility. There is an e-response, and this is new for 2020. In this instance, respondents will be sent a user ID in the mail with instructions to upload response data via an encrypted Census Bureau portal template. This is the preferred method of enumeration, especially for larger facilities such as prisons, hospitals, dormitories. The remaining modes of data collection are paper, and that could either be in-person, facility enumeration, where we do a drop-off or a pickup, where we will provide questionnaires and the facility distributes them, and then we come back and pick them up once they're collected, or a paper listing, where the enumerator picks up a paper spreadsheet and it lists all the residents and their demographic information. And then we key that in at the local ACO. Some important dates to remember are listed on the next slide.
Jessica, it's been 10 minutes, so I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, so I just have a couple of slides left. So some important dates to remember are advanced contacts, those are listed there. Some key dates for service-based enumeration, e-response, and group quarters. So we can go to the next slide. The transitory locations. These are sites that contain movable or mobile housing, such as boats, RVs, portable living quarters, campgrounds, those types of things. And then on the next slide, we talk a little bit more about that, what some of the goals are in enumerating transitory locations. Our enumerators go out in pairs. They conduct site interviews on census day. One of the questions we always ask is, do you have a usual home elsewhere? So if they say yes, then they're counted as their usual residence. If they say no, then we determine that they do not have a usual resident and they're counted where they're at there on census day. And the next slide, again, lists some important key dates and our schedule. So similar to group quarters, transitory location operations consist of an advanced contact phase. Field visits start on April the 9th, where we will work with the operators to interview some occupied units. And so the last slide has some of our contact information. If you have any, additional follow-up questions related to some of these operations or the timeline provided. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jessica. So I just want to encourage attendees again to submit any comments or questions at any time during the webinar. We don't have any questions at this moment, so I guess I could just. Oh, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback, Jessica. I think I'm going to mute you really quickly here. Oh, went away. Great, thanks. So let's go ahead and move on to our next presentation. And attendees, you are more than welcome to ask a question back to Jessica at the end. Do we have one question? Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so we have one question looking at residents, and specifically they ask, what if the usual residence has burned down? Is the person counted in the current place they are occupying?
So I heard the first part, what is the usual residence? And then I didn't hear after.
Yeah, so the question was, what if the usual residence has burned down? Is the person counted in the current place they're occupying?
That's kind of their call. This is Tim McMonagle, the geographic coordinator. It's kind of the individual's call. Keep in mind that if their usual residence no longer exists, so where they're at might be the best place for them to enumerate. I know there's a lot of people may want to say that they use the former location, but that's, keep in mind what the census is for counting people and distribution of federal funds. If they locate to their old address that no longer exists, that'll be moving funds to a diminished population area, whereas where they're now located would be, getting less funds with more population. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But ultimately, I think it's the individuals identify where they're at.
Okay, so thanks, Tim. This is Gita. So we had this question previously before. So for example, if you were impacted by the Paradise Fire and you're relocated to somewhere else in Butte County, it is up to you, because both self-response of your race and all the other questions that are on there is really up to you to answer. So you can, yes, put down your former residence in order to make sure that over the span of 10 years, when you go back, that they'll be receiving the dollars that they need in that community.
Great.
Yeah, and my counter argument to that is you're shortchanging where you're located now. So, but it is up to the individual.
Great, thank you for that question. And I just I sent this out to attendees, but we will be sharing the PowerPoint after the conclusion of the webinar. It'll be on the census.ca.gov website. So let's go ahead and move on to the California Complete Count team presentation and keep those questions coming in.
Great. Hi, it's Gita Skatagi. And I just wanted to go over that the U.S. Census Bureau's goal is to ensure that everyone is counted once, only once, and in the right place. And so we are here at the state to support the U.S. Census Bureau getting a complete and accurate count of Californians. So our mission is to ensure that Californians get their fair share of federal resources and the congressional representation by encouraging the full participation of all Californians in Census 2020. We have some significant challenges this time around. As I mentioned, this will be my third census. For the first time, the 2020 census will rely heavily on an internet response mode. It is the first digital census requiring online self-response. You do have opportunities to respond on paper. You can call and get a paper questionnaire in either Spanish or English, or you can also use the telephone toll-free lines to be able to be enumerated over the phone. Some of the other problems or challenges that we may face is that in rural areas, this reliance on internet response mode may cause some problems in terms of getting all of your inhabitants and residents in the area to respond. But important, as Jessica had pointed out, for rural areas is to know how you will be enumerated. And she went over very quickly the different types of enumeration, but in order to really do really effective outreach, knowing how you'll be enumerated, whether you'll get an update leave, whether you'll get a postcard, whether you'll be in group chorus will be really key to getting your response rate up. Secondly, understanding your community physically, how people are spread out, and actually culturally as well will assist in facing some of the challenges that we believe are going to be faced. Of course, we've talked about the federal funding priorities and shifts in the preparation for the decennial census. And we also know that California has one of the most diverse populations with hard to count and low responding census tracts throughout. Some of the opportunities we have is that we have engaged foundations, and of course, we're encouraging local jurisdictions to engage. So I think we all know what's at stake. It's power and it's money. If we, don't get a complete count, we have the chance of losing 2 to 3 congressional seats to states like Texas and North Carolina. And then the money, I always like to say, on April 15th every year, we send our taxes to Washington, D.C., and only once a decade on April 1st do we have the opportunity to demand our money back by requesting and filling out a complete census form. So let's talk about roles, because some people get confused of why is the state of California involved? The U.S. Census Bureau, it is their federal operation. It is the largest federal operation outside of war. So the state of California, we're involved for exactly those reasons, about power and about money. And if we don't get a complete count in California, it'll impact us over the next decade. So the state of California, our role is really to coordinate, collaborate with the federal government as well as with local governments and local communities on the ground. Local government and communities have a role to create their local complete count committees, which is an organizing principle formed at the local and community levels. It has volunteers, county, tribal, city governments, community leaders, and they will plan and execute their local and regional plans. Tribal governments, of course, have a role in terms of encouraging their residents to be counted. We have administrative CBOs and smaller CBOs, which I'll talk about later when we launch into how we are funding over $100 million throughout the state. And of course, the media, both earned as well as paid media, will have a huge role. So let's talk about the California Complete Count overview. During the summer of 2018, we held 24 statewide regional readiness assessments. We basically went around and kind of did a diagnostic, because we don't believe that sitting here in Sacramento, we can tell every community in California what they need and if they're ready. So there are a number of themes that came out of that I'll cover in a moment. So that was part of 2018 in our planning. Then local complete count committees were funding through counties, local governments, and tribal governments. Other key parts of our outreach campaign are the trusted messengers, and now we're adding it's going to be trusted messengers in trusted places. And that's where we're really leaning hard on community and faith-based organizations to help us do outreach across their communities. We're also doing school-based curriculum pilots and then investing in schools. We believe our youth are really the guardians of our democracy, and they'll be able to hopefully reach out to help educate all of us to be civically engaged and fill out the form. The state agency working group is how the state leverages their reach through their departments that already reach out across the state. And we encourage state, sort of local and city and county governments should do the same. Do you have a department of, social services? Do you have other services that already touch all of your folks that live in the areas? Finally, our media campaign will provide the surround sound that'll enable our trusted messengers that we're engaging on the ground to encourage folks to respond. Next, our implementation planning workshops, that's really kind of our round 2 of convenings, is going to be running from June to September this year, and it's really to prepare for the final implementation plans that are due in October. So this is where we're going to go out to nearly 30 different locations throughout the state, look at the contractors that we're working with, look at the plans that they're developing for on-the-ground outreach, and then identify if there's any gaps so that when we hit it in January of 2020, our outreach will be complete and have complete coverage. Some of the regional themes that I discussed about the statewide readiness assessment that we did last summer are listed right here. The 2 that I will just focus in on that are important to rural areas include broadband internet accessibility. Also, we heard a lot from the convenings about cybersecurity, fraud, and disinformation. I think that's areas that particularly, I think, throughout the state, but impacting rural areas that they'll be interested in and should be paying attention to. And then again, we just had that discussion about residency, natural disaster displacement, and people migrating. So those are some of just the themes of the other ones that are out there. We have a phased approach as we started back in 2017. Phase 1 was to convene, collaborate, and capacity build, and now we're right in the middle of phase 2, which is to educate, motivate, and activate. What we're doing throughout Q1 and Q2 of 2019 is to make sure that our partners that are on the ground understand the importance of the census and then begin to start organizing. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Marcy Kaplan, who is managing our sector outreach.
Hello. The California Complete Count sector outreach will focus on reaching hard-to-count populations through organizations they commonly engage with. And we found that in 2000 and the 2010 census, partnership across sectors was critical to the success of outreach to California's hard-to-count communities. And some of these sectors are education, health services, unions, faith-based, businesses, rural, technology and innovation, and entertainment. And who are California's hard-to-reach and hard-to-count? The state will prioritize its spending on reaching hard-to-reach and hard-to-count populations and our outreach efforts will target these communities. The bolded populations will be even more difficult to reach in rural areas, and those are areas with low broadband subscription, homeless individuals, veterans, seniors, older adults, children 0 to 5, households with limited English proficiency. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jim Miller, our data and mapping manager, who will be discussing where our California's hard-to-count population is.
Hi, this is Jim Miller. I'm the data and mapping manager here at the California Complete Count, and I wanted to give just a kind of a brief overview of the data and mapping out there to help plan and do outreach in hard-to-count communities. And there's more data out there than ever and ways to visualize it. And at both the census tract and block group level. And just a quick definition check. A census tract, ranges in size from, a couple thousand people to several thousand, and a block group is within a census tract, and a census tract can have up to 9 block groups, just by way of geography. And this map you see on your screen here is based on the California Hard to Count Index. And like Marcy was saying, this is an index that reflects the latest data available for 14 housing, demographic, and socioeconomic variables that correlate with the tract or block group being likely difficult to count in 2020. And there's a full description on our website. But it takes into account things like the percentage of renters, a lack of broadband subscriptions for occupied housing units. Data that the most recent data comes to us from the California Public Utilities Commission, and then non-family households, children under 5, and a number of other variables. So I'm going to be showing a short video here, and the first part is a demo of our interactive hard to count map that we have on our website. And then the second part of the video is a 3D fly-through focus on rural California. And in this map, the color will be based on the hard to count index, and the height of the tract will be based on the tract's the percentage of the tract population that is rural. And so those tall tracts are much more rural, if not 100% rural. And you'll see voids around Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area. And the video will also highlight several rural census tracts that have a high hard to count index. So again, first part is a demo of our hard to count index map that is available on our website, and then second part is the fly through. So here, the first part is you can click on a census tract and get the top variables that correlate with that tract's likely hard to count challenges, as well as demographic information. You can zoom in to the block group level. Here's one in Bakersfield, and get the same type of information. The bookmarks allow you to go to any part of the state quickly, so you don't have to pan. You can change your base layer from what it is now. You can also draw on a map. If there's a particular area you want to highlight, these maps also can be, if you have your own shapefile or GPX or CSV file, you can upload that, and then you can also print it. Over here on the right side of the map, there's a way you can filter, so you can highlight on just tracts that have a specific hard to count index you want to focus in on. That's Fresno. And you can do that at the block group level as well. And you can turn the widget off and see everything again. Now for the fly through. And again, the color is the hard to count index, and the height is the percentage of the population that's rural. So you see there, LA's, there's nothing. But other tracts you can see are very tall, particularly in the northeast part of the state and in the valley, and along the north coast as well. In a moment here, they turn off. And so you can see that there are some really rural census tracts that have significant hard-to-count challenges. That first one there was up in Siskiyou County. This other tract, it was in Tulare County, 71% rural. And then here in a rural part of Riverside County, 90% rural with a hard-to-count index of 79, which is very high compared to the state as a whole. In the next slide, just some high-level figures about the rural population and hard-to-count challenges. About 2.3 million, an estimated 2.3 million Californians live in census tracts where the 2010 rural population percentage was at least 25%. And the median index in those tracts was 34, so slightly lower than the state as a whole. But if you look at what the hard-to-count factors associated with these tracts, they definitely stand out from the rest of the state. Lack of broadband subscription, vacant housing units, and unemployed are definitely big factors. Just to drill down a little further on the lack of broadband subscription, in these tracts, about 80% of people live in census tracts, in rural census tracts, where lack of broadband is among the top hard-to-count correlates. And then lastly, I wanted to talk briefly about our statewide outreach and mapping development portal that we're working on right now. It includes it's a mapping platform we're working with Esri on, and the goal is to make easy to use data and visualizations available to the state's partners, and features a lot of web apps and focused on children, the hard-to-count index, learning more about lifestyles and various characteristics of a community. And upcoming iterations are going to include being able to make maps within SWORD, even if you don't have GIS software, and being able to take in data from all our partners around the state. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim. So I just want to stress that we spend a lot of time on the data because this is how our funding has been divided up. It's really data intensive, and we really want all of our partners who are funding to be focusing on the hardest to count populations and understanding what those variables are that make them hard to count. Let's talk about some of the funding. Originally, we had $10 million for LUCA and early planning outreach. That was 2017, 2018. And then through the Budget Act of 2018, $90.3 million has been allocated to the census effort. And then this just last month, $54 million was proposed in Governor Newsom's new budget. So here are the budget allocations, and they are, in looking at them, the additional $50 million out of, I guess we're looking at $129 million of that is $80 million will be on the ground. And our on the ground, we're doing kind of three approaches. Where people are, regions, local governments, tribal governments, community-based organizations, who they are through the statewide CBOs and our targeted media outreach, and how to reach them, which is through the sectors that Marcy spoke about. And then the remaining funds that will be used for admin costs and the proposed California Housing and Population Sample Enumeration Survey. So in looking at things, if you look at how massive California is, we divided it into 10 regions. We are awarding, as we speak, we've received RFP responses for these regions, so we can distribute the nearly $30 million out on the ground.
All right, let's go back one slide for just a second. We'll pause here. Thank you. California is incredibly large, and you'll see that the team has done the best effort to divvy up the funding and be very data driven. I want to check in on the Q&A list. I know we had a question come in that was for the U.S. Census Bureau team. Attendees out there, please do submit your questions by chat or in the question and answer function, and we will answer them as we can. question answer team, do you want to share the one that came in a little bit earlier?
Yeah, so we have one question for the U.S. Census Bureau and specifically relating to enumeration methods. The question is, will the census packets be sent out to PO boxes as well as physical addresses?
Okay, the type of enumeration, the census, was determined by the majority based on deliverability. The self-response areas were areas where mail was delivered to the physical address. And with the spread of E911 and the post office's adoption of those addresses to deliver mail to, that's a larger area. Areas where they did not, where the majority of the housing units were not delivered to physical addresses, those are the ones that would go into update leave. And there's a bunch of other factors get involved, but that's the basis for delivery. So, does that?
Tim, this is Dita. So, just if you have a PO box, what's the most likely way that you'll receive either a form or a postcard or a letter, the invitation?
If you have a PO box, and it depends if the majority of the area that you are in is all PO box type delivery, then you will more likely will get your questionnaire by the Census Bureau delivering it in update leave. Keep in mind, if you do not get a questionnaire, there are some areas that, you know, it was balancing. Sometimes there weren't sufficient number of housing units to warrant operationalizing update leave in an area. But though, if you do not get a questionnaire in the mail, someone from the Census Bureau will come out and visit that residence during the non-response follow-up operation. So that will be that safeguard. People also can go in and you do not, I mean, you're going to get a census ID, and we much prefer you use that, but it is possible for someone to go in online and answer, you know, fill in a questionnaire on that. They will just be prompted first to provide the address or location of their housing unit.
So Tim, for purposes of our, you know, California's outreach planning, is it safe to say if you have not received an invitation by the last week of March, that you can call that 800 number and request a form be delivered to you?
Yes, or you can call in and respond and answer the, you know, fill in the census. Then you just need to provide with, you know, the house number or the address, location, or the physical address number.
Great. I think that's really important for our partners to understand that education-wise, they haven't received it by, you know, the last week of March, that let's make sure we're pushing out that 800 number and get people enumerated by phone if need be, and not wait around until somebody comes and knocks on their door.
Great. I think we had one other question that came in. Do you want to read that off?
Yeah, so this question is relating to broadband access. So the question is, why is broadband so important if we are mailing back paper forms or talking door-to-door to door-to-door enumerators?
So broadband's important if you want to self-respond quickly. The door-to-door enumerators will not be coming out till a little bit later. Like, you know, Jessica and Tim, wouldn't you say they'll be coming out end of April, May-ish, and non-response follow-up really starts, I want to say, toward the end of April, May, June, July. So broadband access is important, and you guys can correct me, for early response. And here at the state, our goal is to get people to self-respond earlier rather than later.
Great. Let's take one more question, and then we're going to give our panelists a chance to talk about their experiences and share their perspectives.
So this question is specifically tailored for Jim. The question is, For those that have GIS platform, is there access to hard to count information and GIS data?
Yeah, via REST API. No, there is not. What there is, the maps are available. Well, the public-facing hard-to-count map is on our website. Those layers are available on ArcGIS Online. You could add them in, and then also on our website, there's the bulk download of the tract and block group files with the hard-to-count index for each tract and block group.
Great. And if you have additional questions about SWORD or about the hard-to-count mapping tool online, I believe that Jim is available by email for direct follow-up about specific technical questions. Definitely encourage you all to reach out.
This is Tim.
Did you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah. The Census Bureau also has our hard to or low response score that is downloadable, and also the Tiger line shape files are available to download too if you want to go that route.
Great, thank you. We can send that out as a link as well.
Right.
The state is really looking to provide community level partners with as much data as possible and really supporting folks in that effort. Okay, so let's go to our panel discussion. I'm really excited to share with you all. I've gotten a chance to meet some of these folks just virtually, which is great, and hopefully you will too here. So I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm going to ask each panelist to briefly introduce yourself, your name, your organization, and your title, and then we'll start the discussion right back up at the top. If you could please try to stay within 4 to 5 minutes, we'll leave some time for engaging attendees. So at this point, everyone should have their lines unmuted. It looks good. And then if you do want to share your video, you are welcome to as well, so folks can see who you are. So Connie, do you want to start with a brief introduction?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear here? Look, I'll start video. I cannot start video because the host has disabled it. I'm actually at home now, so hopefully I have a good background behind me if you want to enable the video. I'm Connie Stewart. I'm the, okay. Sorry, folks, I'm pushing buttons. I'm Connie Stewart. I'm the Executive Director of the California Center for Rural Policy at Humboldt State University. I am a former mayor, and I worked for Assemblywoman Patty Berg, which I covered most of the North Coast. The center has been chosen by Humboldt and Del Norte County to do census outreach.
Great. If you could just move your video camera a little bit down, then we could see you just a little bit better if you feel like it. Great. Perfect. Julie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie Beardsley. I'm the Senior Public Health Analyst, Epidemiologist for Mendocino County. And I had the pleasure of working with Tim and Linda in the 2010 census in Los Angeles. And so I'm enthusiastic about working for Mendocino County on this now.
Excellent. Sophia?
Good morning. I'm Silvia Paz. I'm the Executive Director for Alianza Coachella Valley. Alianza is an alliance of nonprofit organizations and community residents who work closely with government in efforts to improve the region, especially our rural communities in the Coachella Valley.
Great, thank you. And I will just say we do have Jessica on our list of panelists in case she wants to dive in with some of the other strategies that the team has been working on there. Jessica, do you want to say anything else before we start?
No, I don't think so, not at this time. I'll be happy to help answer any questions, so thank you.
Great. So let's go back to the top. So we asked our panelists to share from their perspective the importance of the census, some key strategies that have been really successful in past efforts or that they're thinking about, they've used in other experiences with the communities that they work with. So let's start with you, Connie, to share your perspective.
Hi there, everyone. First of all, we are not part of the county government, so we are getting the contract. We have done a lot of research in our rural regions and a lot of paper surveying, and so we have some great data on, where community members go to get their trusted resources, and we work very closely with the tribes. So, one of our key things is to get trusted folks on our Complete Count Committee who are already in touch with a lot of folks, and then also to check the messaging, because if you've been on the census page, there's just hundreds of documents and hundreds of messages to send to communities, but which ones are really going to resonate are going to be key. So in Humboldt County, federal government is not the most trusted partner, and there's a lot of folks that don't necessarily think about the importance of money, but they may think about it in terms of how it impacts their local schools or how it impacts other resources. And so we're going to work closely with each and every community to make sure we're getting the right message and we have the right trusted partners out. We struggle from having a lack of broadband in a lot of locations. And so we'll be reaching out to locations to see if they're willing to put a site or a computer in so folks can come when they go to the post office or when they go to the grocery store or drop their kid off at school. So we'll be doing some of that. But we're, very early making sure that when we do our outreach, we're going to do our outreach to the right message. We have reached out to most of our tribal communities already. As we talked about at the very beginning, we were part of the site visits in 17 and 18, and so we have a lot of folks that have already said they're very interested in working with us, and so we're excited. So, we're looking forward to getting our strategic plan done and getting our outreach out.
Great, thank you. Julie.
Well, Mendocino County has decided to partner with the Community Foundation of Mendocino County, and we've established a Complete Count Committee and had our first meeting February 12th, and we had about 45 people that came from all different organizations across the county. We're very enthusiastic about working with our partners, and it is a small county and everybody kind of knows everybody. We're organizing subcommittees to address specific issues, and our plan is to really target messages to specific populations. And we are, as a small county, we do this all the time. We have public-private partnerships to leverage resources. And so we're working together with our family resource centers, with Mendocino Social Services, with healthcare clinics, faith-based organizations, and targeting, identifying the areas where we have really low response rates, and then targeting the message to those people. And we also have large tribal areas here too, and working with the tribes is going to be really important, to get the message out, and the community colleges. And so our strategic plan is going to focus on, really encouraging people to do the educational campaign, to really encourage people to respond. And hopefully we're going to get this done.
Great, thanks, Julie. Sylvia, and I just make sure that you are speaking right into the mic that you have set up. I think it was a little bit harder to hear you. So if you could just, I think that's better.
Thank you. So I talked a little bit about Alianza and the organization, but I want to put us in the context where we live, right? We are part of Riverside County, and within Riverside County, the Inland Empire. It is a large region, and the Inland Empire has been historically undercounted and under-resourced. That is why we've created a table of nonprofit organizations and worked closely with the Community Foundation of Riverside and San Bernardino for the ACBO application and ensuring that all of our region would be counted and that we have a plan for it. Alianza, as part of that work, is a regional table coordinator in the Coachella Valley. And part of the reason why Alianza has been chosen to do that is because we've experienced firsthand what it means to have our communities not accurately represented in data. Part of the work that we do as an organization is to achieve change through policy and systems change. And the hardest part of doing this work has been trying to prove to agencies that our communities exist and that we are being left out of policies that were meant to support communities like ours. For example, we have had to demonstrate that our communities met the criteria to be included in CalEnviroScreen, and on a separate occasion that there was sufficient ridership in an unincorporated community to merit our public transit agency to provide transportation services. So the way that we have done this successfully is by partnering with research institutions like the California Institute for Rural Studies, Loma Linda University, and community members to collect primary data. So the census would have, if it was accurate, it would alleviate a lot of our pain in collecting this primary data. So I'll highlight some of the ways in which we've overcome barriers in this data gathering that can apply to the census. And to bottom line it really comes down to knowing your community. So for example, we've noticed that once we communicate to people what is at stake, what it means for them and their communities, that they're more likely to participate. We also increase the level of participation by understanding the likely fears that might keep people from wanting to respond. It could be that they are in overcrowded homes. It could be that they've converted a garage, that they have a mobile home behind in the backyard, right? Or it could be the citizenship question on the census this year. And whatever those fears are, they are real. We should not minimize the risk that the community feels in responding this data. So instead, we need to respond to their questions with transparency. How is their data going to be used and how will it be protected? So in our case, in collecting information, we were collecting information that detailed where all of our mobile home parks in the Eastern Coachella Valley are located. That data is sensitive if it landed within code enforcement because of unpermitted issues. So we keep all of our data, raw data, protected, and we communicate that to people. Additionally, one thing that has been helpful for us is that the data is collected by people who know the community geographically, culturally, linguistically, right? So this is helping us not just in terms of translation, but also specifically for rural communities, helping us engage people who live here will save us time in knowing where people already naturally congregate, where they can be reached, how they can be reached. So I will end with just high-level recommendations for the Census 2020. One is getting an accurate count will take a multifaceted approach that should include education and awareness, technical assistance with completing the form, and targeted strategies for the non-response. Especially because of language barriers and the digital divide in our rural communities, there should be a robust and targeted door-to-door campaign during all phases of collecting census data. And they need to be led by trusted organizations with familiar faces, with visible, recognizable organizational logos. Particularly to rural communities and due to the timing of the census, we need to think up of a strategy of how we're going to reach seasonal migrant workers because they're going to be on the move around this time, particularly for the Coachella Valley. We start sometime in June with the grape season. And finally, everyone can and should play a role. I know that there is national service pointing out about general distrust of government, but in rural communities, we cannot forget that sometimes government are the main service providers. So they do have some trust within our organizations, and learning to know which service providers those are is going to be helpful. Particularly, I'm thinking in Riverside County, the library systems. Our libraries have a potential to serve as census centers, and we need to make sure that if our libraries have existing policies where only library card holders can use a computer, that this can be waived for the purpose of completing the census. Thank you. I look forward to answering any questions.
Great. Hi, it's Dita. Thank you guys for all of that. I just had a quick question. So what are your next steps, like in the next, 4 to 8 weeks?
Hi, this is Julie with Mendocino County. We've got, in the northern part of the county, we have 2 census tracts that are some of the most difficult to count in the nation. And as a result of that, these are areas that were some of the largest cannabis producing areas in the nation, and residents have understandably spent decades avoiding governmental agencies, really distrustful of the confidentiality. So, so crafting our educational campaign that highlights that how the data is used and that it is confidential is going to be really key. And that it's bipartisan, that the census really benefits everyone. I'd like to speak a little bit about the tribal lands and talk a little bit about something that people may not be aware of. We've got about 7% Native Americans in Mendocino County, and while your average person is worth about $2,000 in federal funds, Native Americans are worth $3,000. So we need to educate people about how to fill out a form in a household if one person is non-Native and another is a Native American. And we really view this as an opportunity to strengthen our relationships with the tribes.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for sharing that information.
This is Jessica. Can I ask a question, some follow-up questions about that?
Sure.
So I heard Mendocino County and Humboldt County both said that they do have a formed CCC. And I believe Riverside County also has a formed CCC. I wanted to ask each one of them, do they have a designated seat at the table as a part of their CCCs for a tribal representative?
Yes, we do in Mendocino County. And this person is also the liaison from her tribe to the census.
So this is Connie and Humboldt and Del Norte, and we don't actually have what I would call the formed. What we have is a whole group of folks who've said they're interested. So the paperwork on the CCC is 25, but I think I probably speak for everybody that 25 isn't going to cut it in these in our region. So we will have the 25 folks that coordinate, and yes, the tribes and the Latino community, now all the hard to reach partners will be included in that 25. We have in our area, we have 8 tribes in Humboldt County and 4, I believe, in Del Norte County, including the Yurok tribe, which is the largest population tribe in the state and the most undercounted area with the very deep red on the North Coast map. So, we will probably have separate committees just to deal with the hard to count people based on geography as well. And when Julie talks about, what is the trusted message that's going to go for that community? So for some of the tribes, it'll be, this is hurting Indian health by not getting a complete count, or hey, there is a tribal school here that's not getting its fair share because it's not getting counted. So we'll target messages to meet those folks. And then also we're going to spend time making sure, as Sylvia pointed out, that we know where the anchors are. We know where the anchor organizations, we know where the folks gather and congregate. We've mapped that out, but now we have to check with the folks on the ground. Is that really for the hard to count population where they go? For example, a Grange might be a place in a very remote community that makes sense, but there are populations that won't go to that Grange. And so where do those populations go instead? So we'll do some of that, really teasing out where's the right anchor for the populations that are undercounted.
And if I can, this is Julie, if I can jump in here. We have over 17,000 post office boxes, and we estimate that upwards of 50% or even maybe more of our population are not going to receive a paper form. So this is a huge, huge challenge to be able to get people to go online and to call. So we are going to send out reminders. The educational campaign is going to be really huge. We have a higher population, higher percentage of older people, and in rural areas, they may not be computer literate or have access to a computer, and so some of those people are going to need help figuring out how to be counted. And besides the post office box issue, in many of our rural residents live in very remote areas. They're in non-permitted, non-traditional housing. So a record of existing buildings may not be available. And they're vast areas with no electricity, no cell phone service, no internet, no GPS. And so a lot of the roads have inadequate signage. So enumerators are really going to be challenged to, to follow up on non-responsive households. And it's going to be, I really think a lot of this is going to be the educational component. Lake and Mendocino County have approximately 7,000 undocumented individuals, and we are partnering with Nuestra Alonza and Ukiah Vecinos en Acción, UVA, to inform undocumented residents and their families that the census is confidential, that it's not going to be shared with ICE or any other agencies, that we're partnering with the faith-based organizations, the churches, to locate trusted messengers and to get the word out. And also the healthcare clinics are a really important component because they are really trusted messengers. Our homeless population, for the most part, we believe is pretty homegrown, and they use services and shelters, and so I think that counting them is not going to be as challenging as it was in Los Angeles County. And we are targeting hard to count populations with ideas for incentives. For example, there are large parts of the county that have a lot of poor people, and so if you say, we'll give you a $5 gas card if you'll complete the census form, that something like that may be a real incentive to get people to sign on.
Thank you, Julie. It's a lot of great ideas. I'm hearing the importance of partnership, of creative homegrown solutions. I want to just turn to Sylvia here to see if you want to jump into the conversation, and then we'll go to our question and answer page. Really quickly before, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted 2 questions that I heard about the complete count committees in the county and then our plans in the next 4 to 8 weeks. So Riverside and San Bernardino County have done something that is historic. They're working together, and they're creating the Inland Empire Complete Count Committee. So it's both counties working together, and they're so far what they have worked on with UCR, the Center for Social Innovation, is on the structures of that committee and creating subcommittees within them that will be multi-jurisdictional. So nonprofits will be at the table in the Complete Count Committee. So their nomination for the Complete Count Committee is just going to be starting at the end of this week. And then one of the things that we are planning on doing throughout the Inland Empire and in Coachella is to lead, similar to when we do Get Out the Vote, like a very on-the-ground grassroots outreach effort. And that's what we are planning right now. We really think that, it's gonna take people talking to people, knocking on doors, getting them committed to complete the census as the first part. And so in the Coachella Valley, we're just starting conversations and understanding sort of the pockets where our hard to count population is, and inviting all of the service providers, the CBOs, to see what role they can play in this outreach effort.
Great, thanks. So I'm gonna turn to the next slide, but our conversation is not over by any means. Just want to give a quick reminder for folks who maybe joined on a little bit later. You can type any question or comment through the webinar chat function or the Q&A function. So I'm going to put some questions up here on the screen. We're going to go through some of the comments that have come in and the questions. And if we don't get a chance to answer everything today, we will be sharing these questions and comments with the California Complete Count team and the U.S. Census Bureau team in case people are interested in direct follow-up with maybe a regional program manager or sectors outreach manager to get those questions answered. I just wanted to share a quick comment from Liz from the California Primary Care Association. And she said health centers would like to be helpful partners. We've heard about this from other panelists, and they're wondering if funding will be allocated to help provide needed equipment like iPads or kiosks, as well as staff time to help patients in the waiting room to complete the census. So it sounds like there's a need for health centers to be a partner around the state, and a question about how do we get the right technical infrastructure into those spaces to help people complete the census. I know that the California Department of Technology, is looking into what resources they have for providing technical equipment. That is one route that is being explored as of now. Okay, let's go to a couple other questions.
Can I just add one thing to that? You know, we were thinking about reaching out to the folks that have done the point in time count, because many of them already have laptops that they have used for the homeless point in time count. So if we can get permission to repurpose them, healthcare places and others would be just perfect for that. I think one thing that would be helpful is with the homeless point in time count, there is a way to upload the information when you get to a broadband hotspot, but to put the information in wherever it's located. And so it would be a good question to our federal friends whether we'll have an opportunity to do that as well, because that could be very helpful.
Great, yeah.
Okay, so the next question is for the state, and specifically the individuals interested in whether funding will be provided by the state for improving broadband access in rural areas.
So I know that the California Emerging Technology Fund, as well as CDT and the Broadband Councils, and Connie is with one of those consortiums, have set aside quite a bit of money over the last couple of years, and Connie would know better about that. In terms of the state providing dollars, census dollars, we're looking into getting surplus computers, to Connie's last point, to make those available out in those communities. So I don't know, Connie, if you wanted to talk about the Broadband Council and CETF's efforts in rural areas.
We could talk about that, but probably the more important thing is that we are, hold on a second, I'm getting a call.
Oh,
she got a call.
Okay, I think she had to step off for 1 second, but it sounds like right now the state is really exploring partnerships about how to make that happen. There are existing structures in increasing broadband access, but that's not currently a line item, but it's definitely looking to how do we leverage those resources that already exist.
Yeah,
okay, if she comes back, yeah, go ahead.
This is Julie with Mendocino. That was something that we were really interested in finding out, is whether or not we can send people out into the field with tablets and have people complete the form and then upload them when they get back to town.
Yeah. All right, let's get some more questions in before we have to wrap up.
Okay, so another question that we have is how can individuals connect at the county level if we're interested in becoming more involved in census efforts?
So on our website, we are going to be having the contact names for the counties. And once we award the administrative CBOs by region, we'll have those as well. We have, I think, 44 counties that have opted in, and we're getting those contact numbers, and they'll be on our census.ca.gov.
Hi, Connie logged back in. I apologize. Everywhere there is federal funding that's available that's been given to the telecom companies near you to get communities by census block that don't have broadband. that if you're in contact with the telecom companies for those regions, you can ask them when they will deploy. Most of the funding was set to be spent by 2020. I think it would be good to have conversations with telecom companies to say which communities it's important to assure that they have their broadband expanded by 2020. And you can work with your regional broadband organization. And if you go to the California Public Utilities website and put in regional broadband into the search, your area region should come up, and there'll be a person you can contact who will have the information on where the spots that are key in California that are going to get additional broadband in rural areas.
Great, thank you, Connie.
Thanks, and we'll make sure to get that link and a couple others that we can send out to attendees afterwards, so you don't have to worry about where that goes. Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we have another question regarding training and becoming more involved, specifically for the Spanish community who can serve as trusted messengers. So what opportunities and trainings will be provided and available?
So we'll be doing our implementation planning workshops from June through September of this year. And we are expecting, as part of our language and communications access plan, to make headsets and translations available at those workshops. And so we'll be, our regional program managers will be reaching out as we start to plan those to make sure we're identifying populations that will be attending so that we have those translations available.
Great, and so those are the regional convenings that the state will be offering. I think that at other levels, other workshops, complete count committee meetings, there's a question about how do you, if there's a need for training, getting the right partners to provide translation or to host, to develop their own content and material. So a couple of different ways to go about doing that, but there will be translation for state convenings. Other questions?
Okay, so it looks like that's all for questions.
Okay, let's see. I think I'm seeing a couple other ones. This one is for, I'm not sure if that's the answer to this, but folks have heard that the Supreme Court is hearing the citizenship question. Do we know when it will be heard and when we might have a decision? Unfortunately, none of us work for the Supreme Court, so I'm not sure that we have that answer in this moment.
California AG's
it's
office.
A great question.
Yeah, I think if you go to the California AG's office, they might have something on there around that.
Okay. Couple other things here. Let's see. I heard there was a question earlier on about the best way to find out which tribes are present in each county. So how to connect with tribes by county. It sounds like maybe some of our panelists have an idea about that. I'll just throw out there that the California Native, the California Native American Heritage Commission, NAC, NAHC, maintains a list of all California federally recognized tribes and non-federally recognized tribes, and you can work with them to determine who you would reach out to in terms of tribal governments by county. That's one way to do it. And the tribal, yeah, go ahead.
This is Julie again. I think it's our tribal representative pointed out that it's important to remember that Native Americans don't all live on tribal lands, that they're all over the place. And so that issue of how the form gets filled out in a household where there's a non-Native American and a Native American, that it's better to fill out two forms than, or to have the Native American be the one who is filling it out, just because it's a lot more money.
Correct. We have heard some of those. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
This is Jessica, Alex. And we can also provide you a breakdown for the state of California by county with a list of each tribes within the county if you want to put that on your website. If you don't already have that, if you want that as a follow-up item, we can do that. And I definitely appreciate what was just said about the fact that, over half of American Indians, up to 70%, 60 to 70% do live off reservation, and they are living in urban areas. So it is important to remember that, we do have American Indian populations, both in reservation areas and in off-reservation areas that we want to capture. So thank you for that comment.
So this is Dita. So all of our regional program managers are working with their counties as well as their administrative CBOs that will be awarded. And part of their strategic plans must have a plan to reach out to the urban living Indians as well. So thank you for that.
That's amazing. Thanks.
I think it's also important to recognize when we talk and reach out to a tribe, the tribes have sovereignty. They are their own federal entities. And so it's important to reach out to them with cultural humility. You should start with their governmental structures and go from there to who's trusted, that the tribes have resources that they'll be given to work on this. So it's important to coordinate efforts in a respectful way.
Thank you. So we have time for a couple more questions. I see folks are sending in more. So again, if we don't have time to go through all, we can send them to the right folks to hopefully get some follow-up. So I've got two questions here that relate to farm workers and people who move for work in different states or across different countries. So the example is really from Imperial County and Mexicali. It has a large number of daily agricultural farm workers that cross the border. Some workers may return to Mexico, but they may have also dual residence. So will it be up to the individual to decide where they identify their usual residence to determine if they will or will not be counted? Who decides, you know, if you have that dual residence, who will be counted? Jessica, do you want to speak to that?
Residents decide them.
So could you just like shorten the question again? And who decides what their usual residence is? Is that essentially the question?
Yeah, if you work or travel in another state, if you travel across the border and you have dual residence, who decides where that person gets counted?
So, you know, we do like in instances where you're a snowbird. So if you have another permanent residence and you reside there for more than 6 months out of the year, and, you know, you're not in California for more than 6 months out of the year, then you're probably going to assign that other location that you reside in more than 6 months out of the year as your permanent location. Again, it's important to remember that this is a self-response survey. So, you know, essentially the people determine what their usual place of residence is. But, you know, I mean, I guess that is one thing that we do try and communicate for people who have more than one location of which they reside, that, you know, are you in one place more than 6 months out of the year is kind of our typical marker.
Okay. And just to emphasize, it is self-response. So people get to choose where they, you know, what they respond about. They get to choose that information. Okay. So let's go, great, thank you. Let's go to another question here. I think we might have time for maybe one more. Can you explain how they, and I think this is the Census Bureau, decided to classify a natural disaster affected area to be a self-response enumeration or not?
We decided the type of enumeration based on mail delivery. Once that is set, for the burn areas, for example, we looked at a number of different factors that were listed and decided which would be the best. Just for example, she already mentioned the campfire and the car fire. Some people had questions about the older burn areas, like in Sonoma and those fires up in that neck of the woods a couple of years ago. Those we decided to leave in if they were in self-response. We decided to leave them in self-response, and the reasons were, in a second, on the right list, or I'll forget some of them. I mean, we decided, and it was a large part whether it made sense to operationalize update leave in these areas. So we looked at the number of housing units, the compactness of the affected areas. There were some fires that burned a lot of houses, but they were scattered over large areas.
So I want to make sure we have, so it sounds like there are a couple of aspects here. So looking at what was done before, what were the impacts?
Right. Well, and also like the burn areas is we get updates from the post office, their delivery sequence file twice a year. So in these older burn areas, the post office identifies addresses or that they no longer deliver mail to. So the older burn areas those addresses will start showing up as, you know, they no longer deliver mail to those areas. Those areas also participated in LUCA, you know, after the fire occurred. And the general rule of thumb we gave people is if they thought the house would be rebuilt, to leave it in. If they didn't think it was going to be rebuilt, to take it out. There's also, yeah.
Sorry, 1 second. I just want to honor our attendees' time. We're coming up on the last couple minutes here, and I really thank you for that detailed answer. And I know that there's a lot that goes into these decisions, a lot of data, a lot of different processes. And I would encourage attendees, if you live in a place that's been severely impacted by fire and you have questions about how that decision was made or what's happening, connect with your county folks, connect with Tim and Jessica to get some of those clearer answers so that you know what's happening in your area. I want to give so we're running up here on time. There are a lot of really wonderful and thoughtful questions still coming in. And like I said, we will share those with the state team and the census team to connect you moving forward. I'm going to, I know that Dita, the California Complete Count Director, has another item to move on to. So I just want to give her a chance to go over what we should do right now. And I want to give a really, really big thank you to our panelists, Connie, Julie, and Sylvia. Thank you so much for being with us, providing your insights and resources. And I would encourage folks who are listening in to get in contact with, you know, folks in your region, folks who you've heard are implementing good strategies that you think might work in your area, so you can share best practices. All right, I'm going to turn off videos for now and let Dita talk a little bit about the next steps.
Great. So what you should do right now, designate a census coordinator or lead, and that means and join your local complete count committees. Cities contact your counties, work with some of the joint committees that like Connie had mentioned, as well as Sylvia down there, and Julie. Build partnerships, make sure you're connecting with those foundations. Identify your hard to count populations. Use the maps that we have. California, we based our funding off of our California hard to count track, got additional information that's California specific. Identify your existing outreach methods and tools, and make sure you connect with our state regional program managers. That's on our website as well. Just a couple reminders for counties that are listening, please send in your GIS contact because there's going to be a February 28th stored WebEx to go over mapping. So we want to make sure you're invited to that. So please send that in. And then also for counties, we're going to have our county kickoff orientations on March 20th, March 27th, and April 3rd. We're doing Northern, Central, and LA. Be looking on our website for that. If you sign up for our mailing list, we'll be able to blast that out and make sure you guys know about that. And then here's our contact. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for participating, for your good questions. We will be posting the webinar recording on the website, and we will be following up with contact information. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.